Hello ladies and gentlemen. This time around I'm going to show you how to set up our VEX robotics type stuff. What this is, the different parts of it, and how we connect it to the computer, get things going. First thing, this is called the Microcortex. That is the official name for it. Some people might just say, hey, it's the brain of the robot because everything kind of connects to it and it communicates between the robot and the computer and so on. It tells the robot what to do. So that's why some people call it the brain of the robot. So let's take a look at a couple different parts here. Number one, you will notice it should say what table this is for, what table and team. So this says Brown Uno 1. So Brown 1. And then we look at a couple other things here. On the front side, we can see that there is a port for the battery. So the battery will plug into here. It's a certain shape, so you have to look at the shape and line that up. And then we also have an on and off switch here. So that's how we turn this on and off. Obviously we won't just leave it on because it's going to drain the battery. These other ports on this side we don't have to worry about. In here, so you can kind of see inside of there, that's where the USB cord is going to plug into, which I'll show you in a second here. And then we have a couple different other parts on this top side. So this section here is going to be very important. We are going to use this. Notice they're numbered 1 through 10, and then notice it's called motor. So this section is called motor. So we're going to plug in things that require power in there, like motors. These tabs come out. So if you notice, this is a tab. This tab holds the ends of the wires and so on in. So these tabs, we can, when we're going to, let's say we're going to remove a wire or put a wire in, we can very carefully bend this back. So we can very carefully bend this back. We can also remove it, especially if you're doing a couple wires at a time, you're going to want to remove that. And then the clip looks like this. We have to be very careful that we do not lose this. If we lose this, then our wire is going to come out very easily. That's not good. So we want to make sure that as soon as we take it out, we put it back in, we're good to go. Other section that we're going to take a look at is this big section over here. Up here is analog, and that's numbered as well. So we're not too worried about analog most of the time, but there will be some things like something called potentiometer and some other variable type things that we can adjust that we'll put in there. Usually we're going to use something in the digital section. So if we look, this says digital, and then it's numbered as well. So we need to pay attention to what port we plug things in. Digital things would be like a sensor or a switch. So I'll show you a couple things. Our battery. So here's our battery. One thing we have to be very careful about is that we don't want to hang it by this. That's not good to do because then it could possibly damage the wires, pull the wires out. So we want to support the battery. Just like this, support it. Keep your hand underneath it, so on. So we plug the battery in the front, like so. I line it up, plug it in, kind of clicks, it won't go any further, good to go. I can turn it on. We should get some lights going. I'm going to flip it back off for now because I'm not using it. So again, I'm going to support this battery. I'm kind of holding it in my hand at the same time. The other thing is you should have an orange USB cord. And then that, like we said, is going to plug into here. That's what will connect to your computer, the other end of the USB cord. Another thing that we have to plug in would be motors. So here's a motor. The motor is on the claw. Other things like servos, there's a flashlight, there's a couple other things that require power. Those types of things would go in the motor ports. This is the plug for the motor. If you notice, it's very, very kind of like tiny, thin metal. Looks really, really fragile. So, and it is. So we have to be very, very careful with these wires. We want to pull by the plug. We don't want to pull by the wire because we could possibly pull the wires out. We have to be very careful that we do not bend these. So treat these as extremely, extremely fragile. Extremely fragile. So we'll plug that in. And if you notice, there's only two pins on this plug. We're going to plug that into port number 1. We're going to start there. If you put a motor or something that requires power in any of the other ports, you need to use something called a motor controller. So anyway, I don't need a motor controller because I'm only plugging in one plug right now. So I'm going to plug that into number 1. And then there's like a certain shape where all this lines up. And then that's how the plug will look once it's plugged in. Again, we're being really careful with these things. We're treating them like they're really, really fragile. And that's the basics of how you get this set up. To then take it apart, I very, very carefully pull on the plug of the wire. Again, I don't pull the wires, I pull the plug. And when I bend this backwards, USB cord, that's just nice and easy to pull out. The batteries can be kind of tricky to pull out. They're usually in there pretty good. So you gotta get your fingers on there, kind of wiggle, 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 and you gotta pull pretty hard. Wiggle, 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 pull pretty hard, and then you'll get it. That's it for this one.